o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. Roll call, we have all board members present, plus our student representative Kendi. It looks like we do have additions to the agenda. Janelle, do you wanna just discuss that quick?
Yep, absolutely. So we did have the teachers voted on their master agreement and it was ratified, so that was added as an agenda item for today. And then there's a finalization of an employment action, which has been added to the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion that way, accept the agenda.
We have a motion from Bruce.
Second.
Second from Cheryl. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Carried. Looks like we have nobody here for public comment. We'll move on to consent agenda. Janelle, I'll kind of run it over to you. Well, Cheryl, let's go with bills first and then we can go over personnel items.
Was able to audit the bills today and nothing really stood out. Everything was pretty much normal business. The only thing of note was we had a pretty large bill for the smart boards, laptops and docks, which is a rollover type of thing that happens. And I just noticed that was there. Other than that, and that's a normal thing.
Yep. Yep.
All right, Janelle, we'll go to you for personnel items.
Sure. A couple things that you'll notice in here. So Kari Shoemaker is, so she was on as a long-term sub, and you'll notice she is on now as a hire. That was a transition from her short call license to obtaining her tiered license. So that's why we have that differentiation there. You'll also notice a couple of a leave of absence, and you'll notice a resignation from a coaching position. And then the number 4, the Shelby Ruhoff hire, that was actually just a change of a 0.25 in the contract. And so it had to do with bus duty, so it's actually just updated to be the correct contract amount. It's not, she's a current employee, it's just correcting her contract. And then the ratification of the action against an employee has been discussed via board notes and passing pending the expiration of the grievance timeline. That information can become public.
We also had closed the meetings from the minutes from the last meetings, and then we have some donations. Is that correct?
Yes, donations. Let me do a quick. I'll pull those up for you. So there's a couple of them that are on here. The pop hacks, you'll notice there's 2 things, or 3 or 2 I want to call out very specifically. One is when we had our homecoming. We had a really nice show and there were a lot of people, and so that ended up being a really nice donation for our pop hacks. We also had one of them is, let me see if I can see which one it is. We had an individual who, as part of her employment, she gets to choose where her organization donates dollars to, and she selected our Pop Packs program, and so that was a really nice benefit for our Pop Pack program. There was a donation for a 6th graders going to winter camp, and then the other one I'm gonna call out. Was additional money for, so that one is the additional Pop Pack, or this is the Central Minnesota, this is our cash donation, and then the other one is our Central Minnesota matching funds. So, sorry about that. That was a really very, very poor acknowledgement of the donations that we've received, so I apologize for that. But those are the donations that have come through. Some of these have been shared out in our newsletters. We've talked about them and acknowledged with our public the thank yous. So this is kind of some of those catching up for the board action.
Sounds good. With that, looking for a motion to
I'll
approve.
make a motion to approve.
Yeah, motion from Bruce,
Second.
second from Cheryl. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Carried. Communication items, so we'll go back to you, Janelle.
Yep. So I just wanted to kind of bring the board up to speed on some of our COVID-19 I guess issues. It's we are seeing an increase in our cases and we did have one situation where we had a classroom that is distance learning just this week. It really was, we were able to look at the situation and very much make a decision isolated to that circumstance versus having to look at the whole grade level, having to look at a whole elementary, secondary, you know, we were able to really isolate and make decisions so that it impacted the fewest number of students possible. Our staff have done a really nice job responding to that, and I think parents are appreciative of the fact that we're just still trying. So I was in the process of updating for our COVID monitoring. So as I was mentioning, we had a situation last week where at the end of the week, we saw a need to move a classroom to distance learning. The feedback that we've heard thus far is that it worked from a family perspective, from a staff perspective, because it was a really scalpeled approach to really take a look at the situation and the circumstance and make decisions to keep the rest of our kiddos in session. So in light of that information and kind of where, how that uptick of cases was, we did pull our COVID team back together yesterday. We reviewed and analyzed some of the data, the survey information that were sent to families to kind of take into consideration. And really what the team ultimately decided yesterday is we are going to continue to watch when we have a really large kind of a large, and I would say, you know, like the numbers we were kind of kicking around is like 7 to 9 cases that are isolated that we can kind of track back to, not 7 to 9 all the way across, not 7 to 9 in the building, but that we're starting to see like, ooh, we have a theme here. This is an area where we have to pay attention. We need to really watch this scenario. So, and at that point in time, then we'll address that situation. And if that's happening more frequently, we're gonna have to then continue those next steps. Social distancing is one of the primary areas of I guess, support throughout our community to go back to tracking, you know, who's next to you, implementing more social distancing. We had a really good dialogue around the things that we learned from last year that worked and the things that were areas that really we distanced, for example, in lunchrooms, but we didn't have cases spread through the lunchroom. You know, so we really had some good discussion around that again, just to make sure that we're really still using the best information to make decisions at that moment that is the least impactful for all of our kids. Okay, so I just wanted to bring you up to speed on that because it was our first circumstance where we had to kind of do a little bit of reset and again, our staff did a great job. Parents have been responsive to, you know, thanks for doing what you can to keep us in school. And we're just again trying to make that best decision with the least amount of impact for our kids. So that's the COVID-19 update. Audit update, our audit is complete, and so Carrie's just finishing up those details, and so we're right on track with that as well. And then I'll turn it back to you, Thomas, for committee organization reports.
So when are we gonna get the audit report?
I believe it's scheduled for November.
Yeah, I just personally don't like it just before we have to
Sure.
decide on the same date.
Okay,
If we can get it at least a few days ahead of time, then it's at least something you can look at.
okay. I will give them that feedback.
Any other questions regarding the Janelle's communication items? With that, committee and organizational reports, any specific committee reports at this point in time?
I think we've had any.
I would say the only thing we probably had since the last meeting would have been just negotiations again, still progressing, moving forward. Obviously, we have a agreement with the teachers right now and the other groups, right? We're kind of just on a small pause, get through the election here next week from today.
Week from today.
Yeah.
So get through that, and then we'll go have more negotiation meetings and kind of continue on the progress we're making there. So I can make that report. Student representative Kennedy, anything to report?
Football game tonight, home against Holy Fort, and volleyball has a game at home this Friday against ACGC. And then if they win that, they'll play again on Saturday. Football plays on Saturday, and then volleyball's home game. It'll be a home game after if they win.
Okay.
And musical's still going, they're still working on that a lot. So that's pretty much it, there's not much.
It's just school as usual.
Yep, school's good.
Great.
Alright.
We'll move on to, looks like we have no old business, move on to new business. Janelle, we'll go back to you for assurance of compliance.
Yep. So I just want to show you the assurance of compliance that will be submitted. It looks a little bit different than it did last year, and I'll share with you what those differences are. Well, obviously the individuals are different. Myself, I'm identified as the Human Rights Coordinator and the Title IX Coordinator. Christy Zimmer is identified as the 504 Coordinator again. This is one of the areas that you'll notice is a little bit different. They do, when we talk about mandated reporting training, they are asking for a breakdown of our staff of certified versus non-certified, and that's new. That was not on the submission last year. For us, our principals do, that's part of the back to school training is the mandated reporting. It's a really, the purpose behind this for the Department of Education is really a reminder that all school employees are mandated reporters. And so we, if we have any reason to believe that there's maltreatment or abuse in any scenario, it is our obligation to report that. Not to investigate, but to report. So that's really the gist of why it's such a prominent piece of our assurance. Because a lot of kids rely on our safety net, so that's important. And then you'll notice that there is our policies updated, as we update those via the policy committee. This is updated and resubmitted. And then each of the areas, I'm gonna make this just a little bit bigger so that I can tell you what each of these are. So as you look through each of these statement of assurances, and I'm not sure how much you've kind of looked at these in the past or if it's just kind of like a brush over, but just I want to remind, like these are the reasons why we have to make some of the decisions that we make. For example, Title IX and civil rights, we have obligations under Title IX whether it's equity in activities and athletics, whether it's equity for our individuals with disabilities. Those are, because we receive federal funds, we are obligated to follow those federal regulations. And so this is the assurance that we are going to do that. There are also our employment law. It applies to the way in which we hire and the way in which we support our individuals that are employed. Section 504 is really, it's twofold from an employment perspective. It's student driven, but it's also staff driven, so that we are obligated to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our adults and our staff members that may have an identified disability. So it's a good reminder that when we sign these statement of assurances, we're saying we're gonna do our due diligence to make sure that we follow all of these regulations and rules. The ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, really is a lot of what drives our, especially as we've talked about construction projects and bringing things up to code, you'll hear a lot more reference to ADA as far as accessibility and things like that. You'll notice some of the equal opportunity for employment. You're gonna see some of the prohibition of discrimination, but these are all of the check boxes when you look at what it is that we're saying, yep, these are all the federal regulations and guidelines that we make sure that we're following. Okay, a lot of these you'll notice are referenced also in many of our policies. Okay, and then I'm gonna make that just a little bit smaller here. And then the next section goes on to the state laws, the things that are pertinent to Minnesota statute and very specific to Minnesota. So this statement of assurance goes in and it's due every year by the 15th of November. So after the board approves that we're ready to roll, it'll be submitted after the board meeting. So I think I used the November 1st submission date. So any questions on the statement of assurances? Or the assurance of compliance? I use the terms kind of interchangeably. Statement of assurance is probably more of a federal, for federal funding for special education, but this is assurance of compliance in the same, in a very similar vein.
I'll make a motion to approve the assurance of compliance information as presented.
A motion from Bruce,
I'll second.
a second from Rick. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Carried. Canvas election results meeting. Oh,
So, you know we have a work session on November 9th, and so I did some research to determine whether or not we could use that same meeting as a canvassing meeting to review our election results, from November 2nd. It does have to be a special meeting because our work session does not primarily host, action. It's informational. So, my recommendation would be for us to look at scheduling a special meeting on November 9th at 5:45 PM. So just before the board meeting, so that we can canvass the results of the election. And then we would move into, after that meeting is adjourned, wait until 6 o'clock and then start the next board meeting. It's a very similar process to what you've followed in years past and when there's been other elections. But you'll notice the dates that we have available by statute are November 5th to November 12th, and the 9th falls right in the middle there.
looking for
So
motion. You got a motion from Bruce,
I'll second.
second from Cheryl. Any further discussion? Only thing I'll just verify with everybody, I would assume we figure 15 minutes is ample time. We've done this before and
Yeah.
I think there should be no issue there, so any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Carried. Stearns County Family Services Collaborative Joint Powers Agreement.
So, enclosed is it's the updated joint powers agreement. This year, everything came across digitally, and so it's all digital signature, nothing was paper signature. So as they came across, they have been signed, but I wanted to make sure that you saw, all of the information that came forward. I think Thomas sits on that board,
Yep.
with me. And so this is updated, and as I mentioned, you'll see it's all gone to digital signatures versus last year's when I pulled it up, it's all, they were not. And maybe they did not appear to be, so. That is the joint powers, Stearns County Collaborative Joint Powers Agreement.
Looking for a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
A motion from Cheryl,
Second.
second from Bruce. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Carried. Golf course lease.
So, last month at our work session, we had discussion about the golf course lease. And the board had asked me to have our legal counsel review it, which I did, and there were just a couple of areas of change that I worked through with the golf course, and I'll kind of bring those to your attention and let you know why. But there, back and forth, we're all good, we're all in a good place with this. The biggest thing that came to light was the fact that our real estate taxes and assessment, so as a school district, we don't have to pay taxes on that land property. And when legal counsel looked at that, the recommendation or the understanding was that right now, nobody has to pay taxes on it, but if it should come to a point where our county assessor would say, you know what, if there's a revenue exchange, and there really is not a revenue exchange, I mean, we're not shifting any money here, but if that would be perceived as a profit and we had to be taxed on it, then the golf course should have a responsibility there. Or we come back to the table and say, how is this gonna work, right? Mm-hmm. So that really was the biggest pivotal point where they just said, we've been doing this forever and a day. It's not likely going to be an issue, but the attorney did his job, right? He
Yeah,
really looked
really
at
good
it
job.
to say, this would be the vulnerability from the school district's perspective if that would change. Again, I don't perceive that to be an issue. And so the language that we have in there is that really, if something changes, within 30 days, we're gonna come together and then make a decision about how we move forward. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they would be assessed the fee, if it's a great fee. They might say, you know what, we're gonna just reevaluate and you guys can have your land back, you know, whatever. So we'll cross that bridge if we need to, but this allowed us the safety net. Okay. You will notice that it has been signed and approved by the golf course board. And so our approval would be the final piece there.
I'll make a motion to approve that lease.
I have a motion from Bruce,
I'll second.
a second from Maggie. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Carried. Policy review, first reading.
Policy committee, do you want me to walk through those?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
It's been a while. All right, so I'm gonna bring this document up, which is a similar document that you have seen in years past, because I think this really does a nice job of kind of, it gives you all the details of the discussion. And as you just peruse through this really quickly, all in the red, you're gonna see all the changes, the recommended changes. There are not a lot of recommended changes because many of the changes that are outlined, we have already made, okay? The policy committee has really done a nice job staying on top of policy review. And so this was a really, I felt like this was a super smooth process. And again, there was not a lot for us to discuss, okay? So for policy 102, there are no recommended changes to the policy. And so what the recommendation would be is to just add them, have it just be adopted and as reviewed, making no changes. 103, expression of concerns, complaints, conflicts. Again, there are no recommended changes to the policy, and so it was added as it was presented. Policy 206, the public participation in board meetings. I did link in what our current practice is. I think this has been a good discussion that many boards have been having as of late. And so it's just a reminder about the current policy and practice that we have. And it is outlined right on our school board, on our website, which I think is really nice because it reminds people what the purpose is, what the procedure is going to be, and how that's followed. So that is referenced, and that's the school board's right to set that determination. And as the policy committee talked through that, at this point in time, they didn't have any recommendations to change any of that procedure. I gotta get back to my document. Okay, next one is 214. So again, there are no recommended changes to the policy. One thing I will point out, like you'll notice on a couple of the MSBA policy, model policy, there may have been some red lines, but we've already adopted those changes. So there's no recommendation to change them at this point in time, okay? So I wanted to add that point of clarity as well. So if there are not further questions,
One question
Yeah.
I will have, and this is just going back to my mind from last year, did we always make a motion to approve the first reading, or is it just a first reading and then we motion to approve this after the second reading?
I thought it was second time around.
in my practice, I've never had a motion to approve the first reading, cause the first reading truly is that.
Yeah.
And then it allows opportunity
So-
for feedback, so,
So I kind of feel like we don't necessarily need to do anything, this is just our first reading.
Correct.
Next month, we'll motion to approve the second reading and approve the policies as written.
It is formally in the minutes
Yep,
that we did it.
yep, exactly.
So we'll
Alright, then we can
make
move
that
on.
adjustment there and move on to F, appointment of election judges.
Okay. So we did this last month, and here's why it's on here again, is because we had an election judge who was no longer able to serve. So we needed to amend our election judges. They're not, we needed to amend the language to add an election judge. In doing so, we also, it was also revised so that if for some reason these individuals can't make it, we are still able to hold our election and appoint judges without board action. So that's it, the legal counsel amended this so that we are able to do that, especially with how close we are to the election. So this amended change is updated for our compliance with our election.
So,
I'll move to accept that resolution as stated.
I'll second.
motion from Cheryl, second from Bruce, and we'll need a roll call. When you're ready.
Thomas,
Aye.
Bruce,
Aye.
Maggie,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Cheryl,
Aye.
Rick.
Aye.
That passes 6-0. Bank of the West authorization.
Okay, so we realized that we hadn't made this authorization switch earlier in the year, and so this is just the changing the authorization from Matt being on the account to myself at Bank of the West.
We'll
Make that motion.
Got a motion from Rick, we'll give Miranda a minute here to. The roll call vote, big interview. A motion from Rick. I'll second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Carried. H, teacher master agreement 21-23.
Okay, Thomas, would you like me to review the
That-
highlights?
That would be wonderful.
Okay. So, we do have an agreement that has been reached and voted on and ratified by the unit. And so I'm gonna just walk through some of the key changes that are substantial, or that were considered. The first thing that I'm going to, if anybody's kind of following along or taking a look, on page 8, we clarified the definition of a part-time teacher. In the previous contract, it had language about how many instructional minutes or how many student instructional minutes. So we had really just discussion around, is that the best way to define a part-time teacher? And it's really around how do we constitute pay and how do we constitute benefits and all of those components. So we did some analysis and brought in some recommendations for language to really just talk about how many hours they work in a year to be considered a full-time teacher, for the concept of like, this is a full-time FTE, and then benefits are, so like our employment benefits of insurance and our insurance and 403, they would be considered full-time, but our anything less than that are gonna be prorated for like our discretionary leave, our personal leave, all of those types of items. So the language that was added is around eligibility determination of, and really what the number of hours was equivalent to a 0.8 FTE. Okay, so what we've experienced is we don't have teachers currently that are working less than, most of our teachers are 1.0 or like a 0.5, and at 0.5 then they're not eligible for benefits anyways. So as we walked through, that was one of the areas that we thought added some clarity and really good definition versus trying to look at it from student instructional minutes as a definition of a teacher, okay? The next area that I'll pull us up to is on page 25, the 403B matching contribution. The district agreed to increase the first year, so 2021, the district match would be $400. This is an area that I think is a good plan to start looking at, because as our new teachers come in, they don't have access to the severance concept. So it's an important thing that I think it was a good dialogue and discussion as well. And then you'll notice year 2 goes to $500. On page 26, you'll notice the incorporation of discretionary leave. Just as a reminder, that was in existence last year as a memorandum of understanding or memorandum of agreement. It is now incorporated into the contract. On page 34, we did add discussion about duties and workday. One of the things that we did find is that we have a little bit of work to do between the buildings to understand how there's different perspectives of how things are applied or incorporated at the elementary to the secondary. And one of those areas is what is a normal instructional day. And so we added language that says a normal teacher's day, inclusive of lunch, shall be 8 hours with up to 310 student instructional minutes. So that's incorporated. It does not differentiate at the elementary, at the secondary. It really was an intention to try to kind of say, okay, if we're looking at a teacher as a teacher as a teacher, no teacher is gonna exceed 310 instructional minutes on the regular schedule, right? So that was the purpose of adding that language there. And we felt like it was a better place to kind of define instead of using, instructional minutes to define a full-time or part-time teacher, okay? And then, the other area I think of note that's gonna be important to recognize is on page 41 in the salary schedule. The teachers did agree to, year one, they did not take their steps, and we did a 1.5% increase on salary. And then, we did increase the insurance contribution to $7,250 for year one. And so the salary schedule on page 41 is reflective of the 1.5%, on the salary schedule versus applying a step, okay? And then year two, there is a 1% addition, and then they will receive their step for year two. The insurance contribution in year two went up to $7,500, so the total package for the 2 years is 4.17%. So the first year is 1.37. And those are the major changes. Negotiations committee for the certified staff, any other comments or questions that you'd like to add?
I think you summed it up very nicely.
Okay.
It's truly a nice group to work with, I do have to say. I always have the feeling that group really kind of gets what we're up against and how we have to financially manage ourselves through a period of time. So I appreciate them working with us.
Yep.
And I would, compliment that same comment of my first time working with the group, and they were very receptive to conversation, they were very open to, those discussions as well as we are to them, and it made for really nice negotiations. And I think we'll all be in good places, especially when we kind of get into some conversations and get the buildings together and move through the future of conversations of what the teachers' days are and how those are managed. So I appreciate everybody through that process.
And I just am gonna add too, I'm grateful for the grace that I was given coming in to a contract midway. It's hard to come in and have somebody step in that's you've had conversations with, and they were patient with me and to say, wait a minute, we talked about this, hold on, we'll figure this out, and so I'm grateful for that grace that I was given as well, so.
They've always been very easy to work with.
Yeah.
They're very cognizant of where we're at as a school and what our budget is. Very, very nice negotiations.
Yeah.
With that, looking for a motion to approve teachers' master agreement.
So move.
I have a motion from Bruce,
I'll second.
second from Cheryl. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Carried. And then review upcoming meetings. There's a few of them on
We got a
there.
busy month. Yep, we got a busy month. I will just acknowledge, we had our community forum yesterday. I think it was, I think it went well.
Yes.
We're really just trying to make sure that we get the word out, and so using the community forum was one avenue. Miranda and I are doing some other, we're gonna do another Facebook Live. We've had our town hall live, so there's a number of methods. Some flyers have gone out to coffee shops, they're coming out in the community, so we're just really working hard to make sure that we get information out about the referendum, so.
The sample ballot was sent out.
The sample ballot was sent out, yes.
That brought more questions than anything else.
Okay,
And it got to everybody that was coming up, so even though that wasn't, it was just a sample ballot, if anybody that missed anything, they got the information that something's coming up.
and then, the other piece that I wanna just, add is that there was just today, and it has not been, confirmed by all of the members yet, but there is a negotiations meeting, tentatively planned for the,
15th.
the 15th at 4:30 for the custodial maintenance, okay? So just wanted to add that, cause that had not been added when the agenda was published. additions or things that,
I just gotta edit that time, for November 9th at, 5:45 instead of,
we'll add the,
it's on there, it just says 5:30.
yep,
We can edit that to 5:45. And then, just, something, kind of get that, once we confirm the custodial negotiations.
Yep.
Perfect. Is there anything further? Hearing none, looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move the board to now adjourn.
We have a motion from Jake,
I'll second.
second from Cheryl. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Carried.